On the 6th of June 1944, D-Day commenced. The largest amphibious operation in history marked the start of the liberation of Europe from the Nazis. That day, over 130,000 Allied soldiers stormed the beaches of Normandy to liberate Western Europe. Now, the night before D-Day, another daring and dangerous mission took place. 6 Halifax bombers towed 6 Airspeed Horsa gliders from Dorset across the English Channel. They were to land 150 British paratroopers near 2 bridges in France that were of vital strategic importance once D-Day would commence. These men were dropped behind enemy lines and would have to not just capture the bridges, but prevent the Germans from blowing them up and hold out until they eventually would be relieved by troops storming the beaches of Normandy. If these troops would even manage to break through the German defenses at all. The honor of this incredibly dangerous mission was given to the British D Company in what has become known as Operation Deadstick, the first Allied action of D-Day. The 6 Horsa gliders that were towed on the eve of D-Day were a small part of a massive operation. Preceding the invasion of Normandy, a giant airborne operation by the Allied powers commenced. The troops in the Horsas were there to protect the flanks of Allied troops that mainly stormed Sword Beach at Normandy and intercept German reinforcements that would undoubtedly rush towards the landing areas for D-Day from inland Europe once it became clear what was going on. Their main mission was to seize and prevent the Germans from blowing up 2 bridges, the bridge over the Caen Canal and one over the River Orne. These bridges would allow the British troops to enter the French mainland after they had secured the beaches of Normandy. A few months earlier, on May 2nd, Major John Howard was tasked with the secret operation. He was told he had to secure those 2 bridges. The rivers were located right next to Sword Beach, where the British Army would land. The 150 men of D Company of the 2nd Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire Light Infantry Regiment were selected for the mission, with pilots from the Glider Pilot Regiment. Now, Howard realized the danger of the mission. It was very well possible that over half of the men would not even reach the bridges, let alone be able to take them. As such, he arranged the 6 gliders that were used for the mission all had 1 platoon and 5 engineers on board. Each platoon was supposed to be able to carry out the tasks of the other platoons as well, in case an entire platoon wouldn't make it. The pilots that were to fly the gliders received training in order to become something called total soldiers. This more or less meant that they would not only be able to fly D Company into battle, but they were going to join them in battle as well once they had landed. The next month, every man underwent intense training. Failing the mission was not an option. Howard briefed his men a week before the mission. They had to crash land their gliders to the bridge as close as possible. The gliders, as a matter of fact, were being upgraded, given extra perspex panels, stronger parachutes, and more accurate compasses. There was even an assault boat, anti-tank rounds, and ammo boxes loaded on board. Howard used aerial reconnaissance from the RAF to map out the mission in detail. The crew certainly was well prepared. Now, here was to hoping a sudden appearance of 6 gliders filled with paratroopers would have a surprise effect on the Germans that were guarding the bridges from their outposts and pillboxes. The bridges were protected by the German Grenadier Regiment under the command of Major Hans Schmidt. 2 pillboxes, barbed wire, and anti-tank gun were placed all around the bridges, well prepared to welcome any potential invaders. Even a large bunker stuck with dynamite was at the ready in case of an attack. And if it seemed like the Germans were going to lose the battle, they would simply blow up the bridges. After all, detonation materials and dynamite had been placed on them, or so the British thought. On the 5th of June, as the evening fell, at the RAF station Tarrant Rushton, gliders stood ready for the upcoming mission. There weren't just gliders, but massive general aircraft hemicoils, containing large tanks as well. These hemicoils were a hint of the sheer volume and skill of D-Day that would commence the next morning. At 11:30 p.m., shrouded in darkness, the Halifax bombers towing 6 Horsa gliders took off towards the Orne Canal and River Bridge. As they approached the France at the height of 1,800 meters, the gliders were let loose. The glider's pilots now had to navigate to their assigned landing zones around the Orne Bridge and Cane Kennel bridges in the dark. Fortunately, the moonlight illuminated the rivers, which made them easier to aim for the pilots. As they descended, the men in the cabins of the gliders linked arms and prepared for the crash landings that were about to go down. Surprisingly, no matter how close the gliders came to the ground, there was no firing from the German side. It seemed that the gliders had not been spotted. The gliders crash-landed on their respective landing zones, and gliders scraping over the ground create bursts of sparks and noise that pollutes the quiet night, as the bottom half of the glider splintered upon impact. Most of the gliders managed to land relatively close by their targets, however. Yet, still there was no firing from the Germans. There was no collision upon the landing of the gliders, though there were some close calls. The first 2 gliders were intact. The third glider stunted, however, and its pilots were thrown out into a pond. They managed to survive without any broken limbs, but a third man was thrown from the cabin into the pond and knocked unconscious. He didn't survive the landing and was the first casualty of the operation. According to some sources, the Germans thought rubble from bomber planes fell in the vicinity of their outpost, not thinking much of the noise they heard. Now, for the British, there was no time to waste. All soldiers grouped up in their respective teams preparing to take the bridges. As Major Howard and his men climbed out of their gliders, there was silence around them. They prepared their grenades and rushed towards the German outposts and pillboxes that were meant to defend the Cane Bridge. Most Germans hadn't even realized an assault was going on. They weren't aware of it until grenades were flung at their outposts. Woken up from the grenade blast, soldiers now rushed to their defensive positions, often way too late, and stopped by the machine gun fire from the British paratroopers. Lieutenant Dan Brotheridge and his 30 men now rushed to the opposite bank of the river in order to stop a German sentry that was about to shoot a warning flare into the sky. They cut down the sentry with their machine gun fire, but the flare was shot in the air regardless. All Germans in the vicinity of the bridges now knew they were under attack. It was only a matter of time until reinforcements arrived. Right after the sentry was cut down, Brotheridge fell to the ground. In the distance, another German sentry had opened fire on the unit and Brotheridge was hit in the back of the neck. He was mortally wounded and would not survive the day, making him the first Allied soldier to have been killed by the Germans on D-Day at the age of 28. As this was transpiring, the survivors of the glider under Lieutenant Sandy Smith arrived. Smith had broken his arm but managed to cross the far bank with his men regardless. German resistance slowly fizzled out and the British now controlled both the pillboxes and trenches surrounding the bridges. They had not even been on the ground for 15 minutes, but the bridge crossing the Cane Kennel had already been taken. Over at the Orne Bridge, Sergeant Roy Howard had managed to land his glider through a herd of grazing cows without any noteworthy injuries. The only downside was that the other 2 gliders were nowhere to be seen. Of the 3 gliders, Howard had landed near the bridge. The other glider landed several fields away, and a third one landed 16 kilometers over a 2-hour trek to the west at the wrong bridge. Quite a different story from the other relatively successful landing. Nevertheless, the bridge over the Orne was taken after one mortar assault put an end to the already weak German resistance. Now, as mentioned, the aim of the mission was to prevent the Germans from blowing up these 2 vital bridges. Ironically, neither could have been blown up, even if the Germans had known of the raid. Upon investigation, the engineers that were brought along to defuse the explosives around the bridge realized that the Germans had prepared some demolition work, but hadn't actually planted any explosive charges. The mission so far was going way better than expected. Major Howard now had to hold the bridge with his unit until they were relieved. They manned the pillbox they had managed to take from the Germans, and the first success signal was transmitted to Britain. Ham and jam. Ham and jam. It is said, probably in a romanticized account, that before the Germans launched their counterattack, some British paratroopers knocked on the door of the Café Gondré nearby. When the French owner, Georges Gondré, opened the door, he realized the noise and fighting signaled the liberation of France by the British soldiers now standing in front of him. He opened up bottles of champagne he had been saving for the liberation of France. And by now dawn was approaching and the men waited for the inevitable German counterattack. They had to wait for the British troops at Normandy to break through the German defenses and relieve their positions. Throughout the next day, these German counterattacks were launched against the positions of the men. Tanks, infantrymen, and even German patrol boats made their way towards the bridges. Although one of the two anti-tank guns was broken, using the other weapon, the first German tank that came in range was hit and destroyed. Now, this resulted in an enormous fireball and a burning tank skeleton near the bridge, which is rather ironic considering the British troops at Normandy and the paratroopers dropped behind enemy lines could now use the fire and smoke as a guiding point. By midday, repelling all of the German attacks, the British men heard an approaching bagpiper. It was a signal that the relief force had managed to overtake Sword Beach and was approaching the soldiers holding the bridges. Under the command of Simon Fraser, Lord Lovat, the relief force approached. They had managed to secure the route from Sword Beach all the way to the Orne Bridge. The men that had taken the bridges finally saw friendly faces. Within 48 hours of the start of the mission, they returned home. In total, they had lost 20 men, with some others seriously injured. The bridge over the Cane Kennel was renamed Pegasus Bridge, after the emblem of the 6th British Airborne Division. The other bridge over the Orne was renamed to Horsa Bridge. In an account from Staff Sergeant Boyle, he noted that upon return to England, a civilian asked him why he wasn't fighting in France. He could now truthfully answer, "I've been and come back." And that's a remarkable story of a small, daring, and very important mission the night before D-Day commenced. Thank you for watching this video. There's an entire playlist about the Second World War on screen if you enjoyed it. I would also like to thank all my patrons for their generous support. If you enjoy House of History and want to support my work, consider checking me out on Patreon. For just $1 a month, you will already gain access to the exclusive Patreon series. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.